everyone, welcome back to the Nulyweds channel. So today we are talking about guest transportation to and from your wedding venue. This is a super important topic with regards to destination weddings. If you didn't check out last week's video, which was all about arranging flights and flight transfers, then do check out that video in the iCard up there. But let's dive into arranging guest transportation to the wedding venue first. So, do you need to arrange transportation for your guests to get to the wedding venue? Yes and no. It generally depends on the location of your wedding venue. Sometimes it's actually more complicated for you to arrange a transfer for all of your guests to get to the wedding venue than to just let them order taxis on their own. For example, I work with a lot of central Sintra and central Lisbon venues, and it's so much easier for guests to arrange their own Ubers because they're very difficult cities to navigate with really big buses. They have very narrow streets, and it's just easier for taxis to drop people off quite easily and quickly and cheaply. So in that case, we don't tend to arrange transport for a large number of guests. However, you do need to arrange transport if it is out of the realms of an Uber or taxi service, if you have a large number of guests that are traveling outside of the main city, and also if you have more than one location. So if you are having a church ceremony and then a reception is somewhere else, then you need to arrange a transfer between the church and the venue. So of course the easiest thing is that you're all staying at the hotel, you're all staying at one hotel, and the bus is going to collect you outside that hotel and take you all off at a certain time to the wedding venue. Super simple. Unfortunately, it rarely happens that way. Most people will be staying in different parts of the city, in different locations, things like that. If that is the case, then what you need to do is arrange a meeting point. It's always best to arrange that with your bus company that you decide to choose, and I'll give you a tip on that in a moment. It's always best to speak to them about where is the best meeting point for you to all meet. They will know where they can stop, where they can park, where is relatively central and easy to get to for your guests. That's going to be the most easy thing. Set a meeting point, put that on your wedding website so that everyone knows where it is and what time that meeting point will be. So that is the best course of action if everyone is staying in different places. You have a meeting point, you meet the bus there, and the bus will take everyone to the venue. Relatively simple. Now, what if you are getting married somewhere quite rural and the places where people are staying are all quite isolated? So there's nowhere that they can walk to, they're not in a central city, they can't walk to a meeting point or a local town. It would take a taxi that's like 20 minutes away for that to work. And it's just a bit complicated that way. In that scenario, it is best to arrange a taxi shuttle service. Now, this will come up again when we talk about coming away from the venue, but taxi shuttle services can be a little bit more expensive sometimes, simply because of the way that they calculate things. Taxi services very rarely give you like a set rate. It's like, okay, we'll do it all for €700. No, they're far more finicky about those things. So they will calculate per journey and they will run it on the meter. So when you're working with taxi services, it can be a little bit more complicated in terms of figuring out what the total budget is going to be because they are doing it by meter. But if it is the case that people are quite isolated and quite dispersed, then I find that the taxi way is better than getting a bus that would make several stops. The several stop journey can be really frustrating for the first person to get on that bus. They could be on it for a while whilst it goes, all into the countryside and collects everyone and then brings everyone there. It's a lot. So I think it's best to arrange a taxi service. That means that people have a bit more flexibility in terms of when they're picked up. and it also means that they can travel on their own and get to the venue within good time. Now let's talk about transport away from the venue at the end of the night. Getting to the venue is not too complicated. Getting away from the venue is far more complicated. And I think that the best way for me to explain this is a story time. Okay, I'm going to tell you about one of the most difficult wedding experiences that I've ever had and the lessons that I learnt from this experience. So this was a wedding that was in a relatively rural spot, but not too rural. It was about 45 minutes away from Porto City. And at the end of the night, the couple had arranged that they wanted to have 3 shuttle buses of 50 guests, so 3 shuttle buses at certain times to take guests back to Central City. And in the in-between times, we would give guests taxi numbers so that they can arrange their own taxis if they wanted to go outside of those shuttle bus times. So the idea was that the guests would be relatively autonomous. They have taxi numbers. They all have the ability to take that taxi number to go away from the venue. So mistake number 1. Mistake number 1 is assuming that guests will handle things themselves, particularly at the end of the night. It is not going to happen. If people have been drinking, they are really going to rely on the services that you have set up, so the 3 shuttle services in this case, or any professional that is there, which unfortunately was me. So I spent almost all night from 1 in the morning to 6 in the morning calling taxi numbers on behalf of different guests. Like, I was outside in the cold calling for taxis, because guests aren't going to do that themselves. They're just not. So don't assume that they will. You can still give them a taxi number if you want to, but just don't assume that they will use it. Second mistake here is the shuttle time. So it made sense in theory to have 3 shuttle buses of 50 guests each, and for those to be at certain times and people just get on them at those certain times. That makes sense in theory, but in practice, guests want to leave when they want to leave. They don't want to wait another 2 hours for the next shuttle bus service to come. So say that the first shuttle service is at 1 in the morning, and then the second is at 4 in the morning. Now, 1 in the morning might have been too early for most people. It's like, oh yeah, I want to keep dancing. But then at 2:30, they feel like they want to leave, and they've got another hour and a half to go until the next shuttle service. And it meant that people were getting frustrated, and, you know, as I said, I was outside calling taxis for all of these people who have now decided that they want to leave, but the next shuttle service isn't coming until later. So that's something to bear in mind. When guests want to leave, they want to leave immediately. The third mistake that was made here was to do with the venue. So when the couple booked the venue made a lot of promises about being able to help them with the taxi service. The same to me. They're just like, oh no, don't worry, we'll help you to arrange taxis in the evening. We'll help guests get their taxis. We'll help them. Did they help? No, they did not help. I was outside on my own calling taxis all night. Not a single representative from the venue helped me. And that's nothing on them. It's more to say that take things into your own hands. Just assume that they're not going to help you. So here are my solutions. In the case of when you have to arrange transport away from the venue, there is no accommodation on site at the venue, and it is in a rural place. There's no Ubers, there's no other way that guests can arrange it for themselves. I recommend hiring a taxi shuttle service. So like I said, getting to the venue if people are really dispersed. In any case, if the venue is not within an Uber area, hire a taxi shuttle service. It is so much more flexible, and it means that there will always be a taxi available for that guest to be taken away as soon as they want to be taken away. So the best thing to do is to contact a local taxi service. Generally, you want to have one that has quite a big fleet, depending on the number of guests that you have. So you want to hire at least 4 cars for every 50 guests, for example. So you might need 8 cars for 100 guests, etc. And just arrange with that taxi company that they will have a rolling shuttle service from this time in the morning to this time in the morning. And then you will pay the tab at the end of the night. So what you can do is potentially put some upfront, so put a deposit on the taxi service just to book them and for them to be there present. And then on the actual evening of your wedding, they will run their meters, and whatever the leftover is after your deposit, you pay on the night. It is just the most flexible way. It means that everyone can leave when they want to leave that moment, or give or take 10 minutes that they'll have to wait for a taxi to return. It means that it's much easier to measure the first come, first serve, because, you know, you just hop in a taxi when you see one. Great. It means that guests are taken care of. They don't have to pay for their own taxis. And it means that there's no set times that they need to wait to leave or to stay. They can leave whenever they want to. Let's talk about how to find these transportation services. I find that it's one of the more complicated things to find in your language, particularly taxis. Taxis are generally quite local, and it means that they're more likely to be in a foreign language if you're getting married somewhere where you don't speak the language. So something worth bearing in mind. So the best course of action is to get the contact from the venue. Venues are quite good at this, so they might have a contact for buses or a contact for a taxi service that they can recommend to you. The other thing is to contact a wedding planner. If you don't have a wedding planner that is helping you with your entire wedding, you can contact a wedding planner and they may be able to help you with some small suppliers, and this is one of the small suppliers that they can help you with. They might charge you for the referral, so they might charge you a set fee to recommend a certain number of taxi companies and transportation companies, but it is a good option because the wedding planner can also help you logistically arrange that deal with the taxi shuttle service and the bus company that you decide to use. I hope that this was helpful. I know it's a lot of information, so do go through it a few times if you need to. Next week we're going to be talking about transportation for you, the couple. If you have any questions about this, then please do let me know in the comments below, and I will see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.